Welcome to the New York Book Forum's event called A Lapse in Literacy. We have this amazing panel before us who are going to talk about literacy and what's happening in the world, how we can support literacy in general, and the things that are important to us and in the book publishing industry and to our literacy partners. I would like to begin with thanking Scholastic for providing a beautiful, beautiful space and making space for us tonight. And I would like to welcome this fabulous panel. Bear with me. I would like to introduce Andre EATON, yes. Jill Hardy-Heath, yeah. TAMI Mount, and now I have Mimosa in my head, and that's the wrong one. Mimosa WEBBER-BEY. Mimosa is our moderator for the evening, and she will lead us in this wonderful discussion. Oh, okay. She's ready. I'm gonna go sit down. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you to the New York Book Forum for having this very important conversation here. My name is DEIMOSA WEBBER-BEY. My pronouns are she and her, and I am born and raised in Queens, New York, the ancestral home of the Lenape people. My title at Scholastic is the Director of Information Services and Cultural Insight, AKA librarian. Here at Scholastic, I am responsible for the archive with everything that Scholastic has published going back to 1920. That is downstairs, 2 floors below, about 13 floors from us right now. And the library, where we do readers advisory, reference, and research for our colleagues who are also our patrons who work here at Scholastic. And the library is on the 6th floor, right in the middle, so people can run right up the stairs or right down the stairs with us. I'll also just give you a little bit of background, and then we're gonna go down and each of these folks are gonna introduce themselves. So I was a teacher when I first got out of college. I taught in New York City in the New York City Teaching Fellows Program, Cohort 5. I taught high school English, language arts. I started with 8th grade, taught 8th, 9th, and 10th grade here in New York City. I was a teen librarian in New Mexico, where I work with teenagers on programming, readers advisory, all kind of fun things in the public library. And then I returned to teaching, and I worked with Native American students in New Mexico, specifically charter schools, and I worked in Albuquerque at the Native American Community Academy, and then in Jemez Pueblo, the Pueblo of Jemez, as a teacher there on the reservation. So I've been fortunate to be able to explore this conversation about literacy in many different places, and reading for fun, reading for learning. And then I was gonna ask everyone here as we go down to tell you how they learn to read, because I thought it might be an interesting, beginning to our conversation. So mine will be quick, and I'll tell you that my mother taught me how to read. I was one of those kids whose mom sat them down and went over all of the phonics and sight words and all of that. My mother was trained to be a teacher, but then didn't believe in the public education system and homeschooled us. And so I was homeschooled and I was taught to read and do math, adding and subtracting by my mother, and later did end up in school. So that is my background. I'm gonna pass it to Jill.
Awesome, thank you, DEIMOSA. And then a big thanks to Scholastic for hosting in the New York Book Forum as well. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Jill Hardy-Heath, and I'm the President and CEO of Heart of America Foundation. And we are an organization that focuses on education equity in 2 particular ways. Resources, so everything from books to school supplies to technology, and then spaces, making sure that our public school students, K through 12 in this country, have a chance to learn in a stimulating, well-designed, vibrant environment. And we know that's not always the case, particularly since our school infrastructure was built in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s in a much different era with much different design. So we are determined to make sure that every student, no matter what their zip code, has the right resources, the right books, and the right spaces to learn. And then the other hat I'm wearing tonight is as a member and one of the founding members of the Diverse Book Coalition. The Diverse Book Coalition began almost a year ago with the idea from First Book. First Book is a reading organization that really focuses on book access, and they knew that the problems that our students and parents are facing when it comes to diverse literature and access to books was and is a problem that's continuing to mount and really be an issue and a barrier to learning and being successful in life. So a year ago, they did an all-call, and Andre and his organization and my organization and others here in this room answered that call. And so now Diverse Book Coalition, fast forward to today, is a 40-member organization of nonprofits and associations determined to put more diverse literature into hands of students in low-income areas throughout the country. And in fact, we just made an announcement yesterday at the Clinton Global Initiative that we will be pushing, and I say pushing, but pushing for more access, but also distributing more books, over 600,000 in the next year of diverse literature. And I've got a couple books here that if you're interested in seeing, and I'll talk about the coalition and their determination to aggregate their buying power, which is almost 20% of the K through 12 or 0 through 12 books throughout the country. So pretty significant. The way what I'm going to talk about is how my son learned to read. So we were fortunate to enroll him in a public school, and it was his zoned public school in Minnesota that offered Mandarin. And so the teachers were very strict and deliberate in not exposing their children in the immersion program to English until 3rd grade. And so we, as parents, were asked to hold back on teaching English reading. And the studies say if you are immersed in another language, then picking up another language after that is very easy. Between 2nd and 3rd grade, my son came to me and was in tears and said, "Mom, I can't read." What he didn't realize is he could read, but in Mandarin. And because he couldn't read English like his peers and his neighborhood buddies, he felt that he was at a loss. All to say that no matter how you read, no matter what language you read, you are reading, you are learning. And so that summer, he was determined to teach himself to read, and of course we helped. But he really did focus on how to transfer what he learned from Mandarin, which is very similar in some ways, character recognition, phonics, etc., to English. And so we'll talk about, different cultures and different groups, diverse groups, and what they consider reading, but that was my son's story, and a story that I'll never forget because, of course, he could read. So, on to you.
Hi. I'm Tammy Mount, and I'm the Senior Director of Reading Universe. It's a partnership with WETA, the producers of Reading Rockets, First Book, and the Barksdale Reading Institute. Our mission started about 2 years ago to address the most important, urgent cause and challenge of our lifetime, and that's to teach all children how to read. The Barksdale Reading Institute 20 years ago was founded by Jim Barksdale in the state of Mississippi. And then in 2003, the 4th grade students in Mississippi were 49th on the NAEP score. 10 years later, they were 21st, and now they're 12th. They're the one state in the country that has shown amazing progress in teacher training and teaching children how to read. 33% of fourth graders in our country read below the basic level, meaning they can't understand the simple story or they can hardly read. And 35% of fourth graders can read proficiently. Teachers need support, and Reading Universe is providing the teacher professional development materials that raised the bar in Mississippi to scale for all teachers in the United States so every teacher has access to learn how to teach reading for free. I'm here because our partner's first book asked me if I would come and represent our project. I'm really excited, and on Saturday, I also get to go to District 5 in Harlem, where we will be giving away 40,000 books to every family in the district. Every child gets to leave with 5 books, 20 books maximum per family, and every teacher gets to take 20 books as well. I'm going to take a deep breath because my story about learning how to read is pretty emotional. And I'm going to start by saying that perhaps I realized how difficult it was to learn to read myself only began when I had a daughter who couldn't learn how to read. I was an employee of Scholastic during the most amazing years, the Harry Potter years. And I probably learned to read the most during those years. I read and read and read, and my colleague Stav Birnbaum would read them in one night, and it would take me 2 weeks. I never knew why, but as my daughter was, memorizing the phonics books that I would read with her at night, and kindergarten came along, and second grade came along, and the teacher said, "She is the nicest girl. She's so sweet. She works so hard." My daughter would come home at the end of first grade, and she said, "Mom, my pile just gets getting higher and higher and higher." Well, last night, we were sitting in the hallway because her room is such a mess, she can't do her homework in her bedroom. She's 16, and her English teacher asked her to write a paper about how she feels about reading, how she sees herself as a reader. And she read it to me last night, and she started off by saying, "I don't like to read. I've never liked to read. When I was younger, I had no ideas what the symbols on the page meant. I didn't know that that these letters represented sounds and that these sounds formed words, and no one ever taught me how to put them together and learn how to read until she felt like she had failed." My daughter has dyslexia, and she was diagnosed in 3rd grade, and at the same time, I diagnosed myself. And that only happened because I happened to be working on a project for PBS Learning Media on the foundations of teaching reading. And I was working with an amazing teacher of reading, Nell Duke, at the University of Michigan. She said, "Tammy, oh my gosh, you have got to see this image of the brain. It's a functional MRI image of the Dr. Sally Shaywitz and her husband at Yale University, and they are mapping the reader's brain, skilled readers and non-skilled readers, and you won't believe it. You can actually see the development of the brain of children with dyslexia or non-skilled readers, and their brain is developing along with direct explicit instruction that is targeted to the needs of how they learn to read and speak and write. So full circle, I'm committed to the challenge of my lifetime, to families who might not be able to afford a tutor, to find that right school for their child, to turn their life around with intervention that literally will change their life. And I'm really excited to share my story. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Tammy. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. I like call and response. I'm one of those, so definitely. My name is Andre Eaton. I'm the New York State Director for ParentChild Plus. ParentChild Plus has been in existence for 58 years. It was started by the late Dr. Phyllis Levenstein on Long Island, who wanted to understand why certain children succeeded while others didn't, and it started as a research project that she did in Columbia. Lo and behold, it became this national program, and it's gone through several iterations of its name. Some of you may be familiar with Mother-Child program, then the Parent-Child Home program, and now Parent-Child Plus. It is a national and international program that has a home visiting model, because what Dr. Phyllis Levinstein learned was that you could not wait for children to go to school in order for them to learn, that the best place that they can learn is right in the home. And you had to start early. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir when I say that the earlier you start with children, the greater their chances to succeed. And there's an opposite side of that coin. We know that the later that you start with children, the more deficits they may have as they go into school as well. So the mission of Parent-Child Plus is really to give possible opportunities for all young people, as well as putting around them all of the supports that they need for parents, and really based upon parent engagement. As I mentioned earlier, it's a home visiting model where we provide early learning specialists, those are the home visitors that actually go into the home. It is a 46-week program where we do 92 home visits, where we actually bring in free books, 46 books, which are gifts to the parents, and educational toys, which they actually build a library. We start with children as young as 16 months up to age 4, or right before they go to 3K now, in New York City as well. But the first visit is initially an introduction of the book with the parent through the early specialists, and they actually model or train with the parent on how to use the book. And then they come back to the second visit during the week to see how the parent has done with the book. We have books in more than 50 different languages, and any culture, any linguistic language that there is, we try to match earlier specialists as well from that culture to be with that particular parent, parent and child as well, because we really believe that the strong bond, the first and primary teachers are the parents in the home. And when I talk about parents, I'm not just talking about mom and dad, I'm also talking about foster care parents, talking about grandparents, or a caring adult that actually can be a part of our program overall as well. Parent-Child Plus has blossomed into 142 programs nationally. We're located in 16 states, and we're in 6 international countries all over. As a New York State director, we have 26 program partners. Many of them are social service agencies, libraries, school districts, all the way up from Onondaga County, Westchester County, Long Island, Rockland County, New York City, and also in the capital region too as well. And many of these departments have embedded our curriculum and our program inside their overall programs as well, because we're trying to reach as many families and children across the board. We also have a second model, which was developed maybe about 8 years now, where we're working with child care workers or home-based child care workers, family, friend, and neighbor. What we wanted to do was to really enhance their skills. For those parents who could not be a part of our home-based curriculum with the 92 visits, we wanted to work with child care workers as well. That's a 24-week program, but they get about 24 books as well. And as they get the books, they also give the books out to the children, which also takes them home to the parents. So they can have as many as 3 children in their home daycare, or as much as 5 to 8, but each child is going to leave with a book in hand, and we want to continue to build that workforce. What I'm really excited about with our particular program too is that there is also a third component. We try to hire as much as possible from the community. We have about 20% of our graduates who are now early learning specialists themselves, who have to be able to proficiently read well inside the home, and be able to read well. And many of them have been hired by our local program partners at a livable wage in New York City too as well. And many of them have gone on to actually become what we call coordinators, who are the managers of the programs too as well. So that's the third dynamic, is to really build a workforce inside both the home visiting model as well as the home-based childcare model overall. And the reason why we're part of this New York Book Forum is because, just as has been said, we want to get as many books to as many children as possible. The books are age appropriate. We see that it works for our parents. Again, I'm preaching to the choir. We know that by 3rd grade, that if you're not proficient in reading, then you have a harder time to catch up. And then there's also called a pipeline to prison, because they build prisons based upon the reading level rates of third graders as well. And only 46% of New York City or New York students are proficient in reading. So we have a social justice problem that we need to combat with the lapse and the gaps that's in literacy. And when I talk about literacy, I'm not just talking about reading. Literacy is much more than that. It's how you communicate. It's how you speak. It's social emotional development. It's play. It's cognitive development. That's what we're bringing. That's what we want to see. Many of the parents cannot read themselves, but they're able to use the method called the dialogic reading method to show the pictures and show the colors, because we know that learning starts at conception. You cannot wait until you go to a 3K or kindergarten because, again, you're going to have to really begin to pick up if children have not heard words, if they're not being communicated with, and they have not had the opportunity of play inside the home. And we begin to believe that starts with the parents, and the parents get more enthused. You have a whole library of books that once they enter 3K or kindergarten or Head Start, they're going to see those same books. And so they're already either at the same level or beyond their more affluent peers. And that's what we're trying to do. How did I learn how to read? I had a mom. I'm a child of a single parent household. Way back in the early 70s, I'm a Brooklynite. I was born and raised in Bushwick. I still live in Bushwick, New Bushwick, because it has changed. From what it was in the 70s and the 80s, and those of you that were around in those particular days know that that was not the greatest times for my neighborhood and my community of Bushwick, but I certainly have seen the transition. But my mom had 4 children. I'm her baby, but at age 3, I was put in a faith-based church childcare. That's my earliest remembrance of reading and learning how to read and really seeing caring adults. Lo and behold, went to Halsey Junior High School. It's not one of the best junior high schools, but there was a program called A Better Chance that sent these inner city kids to these boarding schools and so forth. But we should give a better chance to the younger kids. And so I went away to boarding school, and lo and behold, and the rest is history. I went to a school called Lawrence Academy in Groton, Massachusetts. And again, but it started in the foundation of caring adults and having a parent who said, I may not be able to give you money, but I'll be able to give you the ability to get an education. And I learned from her because she pushed herself off of welfare, went to CUNY, City University of New York, became a registered nurse, and put four of us through college. I went on and got my master's and so forth. And so that's my story of how I learned to read. Thanks.
That's wonderful. I'm glad that you're making me think that, the importance of the parent as the educator. We're going to come to when we get to our 3 topics. So we had a pre-conversation before this meeting today, and we came up with 3 topics that we're going to kind of work our way through. And the first one is reading as a continuum. So thinking about reading from the earliest ages with the parents all the way through the adolescent and teen years, and how do we keep that continuum going with momentum, and how do we address the cracks and the breaks within it. The second topic that we want to talk about is the reading environment, which could be physical, but it could also be, emotional, social, relationships and stuff like that. And the third topic that we're going to talk about is having respect for culture. So I wanted to, just reflect on, you mentioned, that literacy is more than just reading. And you were talking about your son, learning to speak in Mandarin. And I just wanted to know, when I became a teacher in the New York City Teaching Fellows, second year in the master's program, we had to write this it was our statement of best practices in teaching literacy. And the professor, it was a 5-page paper, maybe even 10 pages. And every time we had to rewrite it, it had to get shorter until we got to a 1-page definitive statement of our philosophy for the best practices of teaching and reading. And I still go back and look at this periodically as a front page of my teaching portfolio. My thesis when I was a teacher was that I was going to walk into the classroom with the assumption that my students were intelligent. Radical. Like, what if I just assumed that they were all smart, they're all intelligent? Nobody here is at a deficit. They are all masters of, literate in whatever their domain is. And for this kid over here, it might be Grand Theft Auto. And for this kid over here, it might be what was on 106 in Park last night. For this one over here, it might be everything about the Knicks, going back to whatever. And I'm literate in academic English. And so I'm going to basically give you the cheat codes so that you can exist in my world, and in turn, I need the cheat codes for Grand Theft Auto. And so I used to give them assignments. I remember some kids in particular assignment that they had to, basically write me a, instructional essay, 5 paragraphs, how to beat level like 3 or 4 or something like that, how to get the tank. And they wrote me the whole essay. They had a supplementary page that had all the squares and circles and X's that I needed to press, and the arrows were up and down, left, right, and all that. And I was playing that night, and I didn't beat the level. And I come in the next day, and I give the kid his paper back with like a C+ or a B on it. He's like, "What, miss?" I said, "I didn't beat the level. You don't get an A." Are you kidding me? All of a sudden, a Black Hawk helicopter came out of nowhere and took my tank out. So you need to rewrite the essay and tell me how to beat the helicopter, and then I'll readjust your grade. So, that was a back and forth between us, because the idea there being, have them write about something that they care about and don't worry too much about the grammar. You'll get to that last. Right now you're revising and working with the idea. So I'm going to also give you guys some facts, some numbers. At Scholastic, we do a biannual Kids and Family Reading Report, which is a survey that we send out into the field, asking parents, asking kids, asking families what they think about reading for fun, how they find the books they like, things like that. So, the front end of our report, the section that's on the web right now, Reading in the Lives of Children and Parents, we talk about how the reading frequency for children ages 6 to 17, which is what we survey, the levels generally held steady in recent years after declining in the early 2010s. However, while the majority of children read a book for fun at least once a week, only 28% of children are frequent readers, which means that they read 5 to 7 days a week. So then when we get to the lapse in literacy, and I was looking at those numbers, there's a decline in reading enjoyment, frequency, and perceived importance as kids get older. And so when you look at the Kids and Family Reading Report, you'll see, that the bar graphs, it gets smaller as the age bands, go higher. So the other important thing that was measured in this survey was how that connects to mental health, right? And infrequent readers right now, especially with teenagers, like this data was interesting to me because I used to teach adolescents specifically. They're more likely to say, kids that are 12 to 17, that their mental health is worse now since COVID. 32%, that's infrequent readers, versus frequent readers, only 23% of them say that their mental health is worse since COVID-19. So, not a direct causal, but very interesting. And then with more participation in structured activities, digital engagement, and stuff like that, reading is facing increased competition for children's free time. You all know that. But between ages 6 to 17, the overall group, digital activities have risen, and that includes gaming, phone use, schoolwork. But within the 6 to 11 band, the early elementary years, there specifically was a huge increase in digital activities that were just for fun. And so, that is a little scary because, generally we're celebrating, reading at the younger ages, reading with your parents, stuff like that. And we're starting to see that digital is creeping, into those younger years too. So, given like setting the stage, what are we going to do about it? That's why we're here now. So we're going to talk about the continuum, and I'm going to start off with Jill and talk a little bit about, because you're going all the way K to 12. And so,
correct. Yeah. And by the way, I'd love that statistic. And we'll grab that research from you. As I mentioned, Heart of America focuses on resources and spaces, and what we've found since COVID is more and more demand for mental health and wellness rooms, which should be chock full of books. And what I will say is, as DEIMOSA mentioned, there is a continuum of life, continuum of learning, and continuum of reading. It starts with the home, the caring adult, which we'll hear more about, and really how that child is exposed to books, exposed to speaking and words, It is all about access. It really is. And then they step into the K through 12 environment, and it continues to be about access. And to further play off of one of the statistics you mentioned about the national average and Mississippi average of learning, we in the Diverse Book Coalition realize and have known this, the children coming from different cultural backgrounds and the African American, Native American, Latino, the proficiency percentage rises exponentially to 80, or excuse me, only 20% of those children in that demographic in those demographic groups are proficient in 4th grade. So that means 80% of the brown children and our brown children throughout the country are really lacking in reading proficiency. And there's many reasons for that. It can be access to books, it can be teaching, but I also think it is about diversification of literature and education materials. To your point, and I love the approach you took with your students and having them write about something they love, right? No matter what it is. Because if you're passionate about something, you will engage in that topic and you'll write about it, you'll imagine about it. The fact that they had addendums and like playbooks for you is amazing. Like they went above and beyond. Not many papers actually have that type of thinking in it. All that to say, First Book just released a study yesterday at the Clinton Global Initiative, and really a study that we formed the coalition on, and that is they took 450 classrooms in the K through 12 space, mostly K through 3, I believe. And they actually infused them with a variety of diverse titles that represented the students in those classrooms. What they found was that reading went up 4 hours a week per student because of the fact they could choose their own literature, choose their own adventure, choose their own language. And yeah.
I'm not surprised.
So access to diverse books that actually inspire you, that you see yourself in, that help you go to another planet, go to another country, go to another state. The windows and mirrors theory is real. And when we don't have diverse titles in classrooms and libraries, that is an issue. So again, the K through 12 space is really important. We have traditional school time, 8 hours a day plus, right? And so these spaces need to be chock full of diverse materials, including books. Then you have auto school time, and that is the continuation of the pipeline and back to home. So books need to be in all aspects of the continuum. One other thought, and sorry, but also just I was just talking to my colleagues earlier today, and really dumbfounded by what is happening in some of the states where they're turning libraries into detention centers. And that breaks the pipeline. We need classroom sets of diverse collections, and we need libraries with diverse collections. So again, the continuum has to be continued. And right now, teachers and parents and caregivers need our help to make sure that they have the resources and the support and the advocacy to help them help their children and our children across the country.
I think what you're saying with the libraries is so important. I'm thinking about my elementary library, which probably wasn't changed from 1950 or whenever the building was built. The same exact books in there. I read them. I read all the Nancy Drews, trust me. But then when I was teaching in middle school in Rockaway, which is where I'm from, the school library, the kids never set foot inside of it. It was used for professional development. It was used for storing materials. They did not let the kids at IS 53 in Far Rockaway, Queens go into the library. And in 8th grade, they had the science exam, the New York State science exam, and they were staging it in the library. And I'm sitting there with my homeroom, and the kids are looking around. They're like, what is this? Is this a library? Never been in here? You know, so just that, like, there's no space in the building that you can walk into and be surrounded by books. Very few teachers that were, you know, building a classroom library, you know, at that point. And then working in charter schools, a lot of times, depending on like what building we were inside of. So in one situation, I was in trailer park, you know, kind of, not trailer park, but trailers on the baseball diamond of a middle school, but we're running a high school. And then another time we were on one floor of a building, the same thing, we're running a high school, it was a middle school. You know, there's debates about sharing resources, who gets to use the gym when, who gets to use the auditorium when, you got to stage lunch so that people don't overlap, and the library. And then another school I worked in, they turned the library into the teacher's lounge because they needed a teacher's lounge for the other school, since there are 2 schools in the building, and they didn't want the teachers to share the teacher's lounge. So now the library becomes a teacher's lounge. So, you know, often the librarian is the first one who gets sent back to the classroom to teach. Library gets shut down or doesn't get supported. And also what you were saying just about choice and access, we do find with the Kids and Family Reading Report over the decade that, you know, every other year that they've been doing it, that is consistently where kids find books that they love to read. Not just learning to read, but books that they love. Most kids, the first book they love that they found like to read is a book that they picked out themselves. You know, and so being able to have choice and access and, you know, being able to choose the book yourself and having a multitude of books to choose from is how you're going to find that first book. And when you find a book you love and you finish it, that sense of success, so you want it more. I want to do it again.
Yeah.
I want to feel that sense of success again, again, again.
And that's what I would say, playing off your statement of loving, you know, digital time and gaming. We want our children to feel that way about books and reading. And the only way they're going to get there is through choice. And choice in format, too. It's not just topical. It's not just language. It's format as well, like comics.
I'm going to talk about comics for sure. Yeah, go for it. Was it Andre? Did you want to go? You look, you're leaning
Certainly,
forward.
I can certainly talk about the continuum, and I think that the continuum, it has to be something that you want to be a part of, have to be a part of, in order to see the full development. But first, it always goes back to the parents. We can work with the children, but again, my program is a home visiting program. Right. And you are inviting these strangers to come in your home for 46 weeks to engage with the parent and the child inside their home. That takes trust, that takes accessibility, that takes cultural awareness, that takes diversity, and the willingness to actually do that. And over 58 years, ParentChild Plus has been able to engage parents in the home. But home visiting has had a bad stigma for many, many years because people think that you're coming in, you're from ACS, or you want to do a child abuse report, or home visiting for health reasons and so forth. But here we are, we're trying to do an early literacy program to get children and the parents engaged and ready for school too as well. So you have to be a program that understands the community, that's a part of the community, and then can also join in with the number of resources that are within the community. ParentChild Plus is a part of several coalitions, including the New York Book Forum, where we want to bring diversity of books and in different languages and so forth into the home too as well. We're also a part of Cities First Readers, which is an initiative that brings other early literacy organizations together that are not working in isolation. A lot of time we call these coalitions and initiatives, and you got all these number of groups, but are they really working together? Right. Cities First Readers, we refer in and outside, and that includes Reach Out and Read, it includes Jumpstart, it includes every library system in New York City, where we know what area code, what community, where each one of those programs are. And then as you in ParentChild Plus at age 4, then we're gonna hand you off into your school, or we're gonna hand you off to another particular program that will pick it up from there. So when you're talking about a continuum, that means that you're gonna be there through 12th grade. So we're talking from 16 months through 12th grade to as well. And we're a part of this coalition because we want to address, obviously, the enormous literacy gaps, and we really need everyone to work together. That's the publishers, that's the educators, that's the teachers, with community service delivery organizations, again, who are trusted, who have been a part of the community, who are diverse, and certainly we love to match our home visitors with the same culture, language of the parent as well. Overall. Jill was talking also too about the books and it being diversified. Well, the reason why we want diversified books is because we know that it's a critical component of early literacy. When I was coming up, I didn't see too many books and too many authors of folks from my background and the African-American historical background. I didn't get that until I got to college. So we don't just celebrate a month of each culture, and that's great. I'm glad that we have a Latino American History Month, Native History Month, African American History Month. But we now embedded in our full curriculum. So you may get a book at any particular point of the year where you get a book written by a Native American author, written by an African American author or a Latino author or an Asian author too, as well. We just believe that you got to have diversified books with diversified authors in diversified homes because, as you know, we are a diversified city in New York City and in this particular state, and we need to take this to the nation and also to the world. And that's how you begin to build that continuum as you begin to as you build trust with your organization, and then you give that handoff or they graduate to another organization that's also well trusted. The parents also learn the books, and so they already know what to expect when they get into kindergarten, that it's easily accessible, that the application process for a child care organization or to get into kindergarten is also simplified and easy for those kids to get into, and for the parents to actually navigate to as well. Because these are parents who also want to see their children succeed just as many of us want our children to succeed as well. And so we are a part of this effort to bridge that gap in the lapse of literacy because, again, as I mentioned earlier, I talk about holistic literacy. We talk about the ability to read, speak, learn, listen, and that's the one of the most powerful tools any young child can have that's going to take them to success in this world. I'll stop there.
I have a question for you, though. You have mentioned the home visits a couple of times. What is that conversation like? Because one of the facts that I had was the declining understanding of the importance of reading, and here you are knocking on the door saying, I want to come into your house and talk about reading. How do you guys get yourselves in the door, and how do you maintain that relationship?
Great question. The first step is that we go where the parents are. We're not waiting for the parents to come to us. So we're not just in the building. We will go out in this community. We have another initiative and a part of that is funded by the Pinkerton Foundation called South Jamaica Reads, for example, where we actually had to go into the community. And again, same network of groups like City's First Readers who have come together in the South Jamaica community, again, from 0 to 3rd grade or to age 8, to actually begin to build that overall continuum. But we go where the parents are. We go to speak with the parents, share with the parents that, hey, we have this program where we're going to give you free of charge, the low price of free, 46 books that are school ready, that are age appropriate, that are also diversified. And guess what? You can choose the language. We give it parent choice. It's the parent's choice of when they want us to come in there. You also have to be flexible. So sometimes it may not be Monday through Friday where you can meet with the parent. It might be on a Saturday. It may be at certain hours or in the evening hours because parents do work too as well. But we're gonna make it as simple as possible to engage these parents and try to gain their particular trust overall. And then as you build in the community, like for example, I believe we've been in South Jamaica for more than 8 years now, they know the program. They understand where you're coming from. Oh, that's that program where you get all these books. And the best way that your program can be recommended is from parents that already live in the community. Word of mouth travels fast. And if they know that you're good, they're going to hang with you.
Jill, did you want to add? Tammy, sorry, do you want to add? You don't have to.
Staying in my lane.
Okay.
My teacher professional lane. I just want to talk about for a minute the importance of read alouds and oral language and maybe the start of the continuum.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody is a fan of Mark Seidenberg's book, Reading at the Speed of Sight. It's really thick, and it talks about how the brain learns to read. And he writes a lot about a really interesting fact that I didn't know. I have a master's degree in education. I taught first grade, second grade, fourth grade, and I wasn't taught how to teach reading.
Right.
But when I figured out I needed to learn how to teach reading because my daughter couldn't read, I read books like Mark Seidenberg's book. And he said that reading is a human invention. Words, letters, words, we all naturally as humans, we have an oral language, and we have developed an oral language that we can speak and listen and communicate with each other. But the written word, print, letters, symbols that represent sounds and language is a human invention. And not every human, our human brains are not built to know how to read automatically and naturally. He says about 5% of human beings can just start reading without any instruction. 35% of human beings need 25 to 30% of people need some instruction to learn how to read. And the rest of the 40% need a lot of direct and explicit instruction. And there are about 5% of kids who may not, for one reason or another, with severe learning disabilities, may not learn how to read at all. But what is most astonishing is that when you survey teachers and you ask them, what was it like for you to learn how to read? Most of them say, oh, it was really easy, or I needed, fairly little instruction. Their memory of school and reading, it's all really fantastic, and they become teachers. But in reality, most of the kids, about 60% of the kids in the classroom, really need to learn how to read. So we've got a lot of work to do with our teachers. But I just want to say that every kindergartner, every preschooler who enters the room, that first day of school is ready to learn how to read if they've got parents at home who are developing oral language and reading to them aloud. So thank you so much for your program.
Absolutely. And, having taught adolescents with 8, 9, I did teach fourth grade briefly, but 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I realized very quickly that I don't know how to teach people how to read. The way that I'm taught in the master's program for adolescent ELA 7 to 12 is how to help people read to learn. You're learning how to help them with reading comprehension and understanding inference and cause and effect and things like that, and you're also working with them on, there's all this cognitive brain science on how to connect a fact that you're teaching them right there to a fact that they know, prior knowledge. So text-to-text connections, text-to-self connections, text-to-world connections, but not phonics, not, I was not trained in the, common branches, master's program, and yet you'll have somebody sitting in front of you who's 14, 15, 16 years old and can't decode.
Yeah.
It was frustrating, and you're trying to figure out what to do. I started trying to do like Greek and Latin root words. I really went deep with the kind of SAT training stuff that I had to do when I was in high school. So, vocabulary, but I had to learn how to do that because I didn't learn Greek and Latin words when I was in school either. Your point, it was easier for me to learn, but I'm trying to learn how to teach in a different way than I learned.
Yeah. There are over 60 skills that a reader needs to master in order to arrive at successful reading comprehension. Yeah.
All right. So some of the facts that I have, looking at this, when we were talking about the reading experience, the benefits, the positives are mostly experienced by younger readers. And so some of those things are like the quality time with the parent and family, read aloud in particular, which I'm glad you guys brought up. And our research shows that kids love sound effects and they love when parents do voices and stuff like that. And you can still do that with teenagers. But younger kids tend to get that. And the they're able to find books that they like more easily. You know, when we get to the older ages, our research shows that parents underestimate how difficult it is for adolescents in particular, but also teenagers, to find a book that they like. They think it's not that hard for them, but it actually is difficult to figure out what they like to read, and that's why we need choice and all those different kind of things. And so as we go into the next one, the reading environment, you know, having books in the home, you know, books in school as well, but particularly when we look at frequent readers versus infrequent readers, there's something like 60 or so, maybe 64 books in the home on average for people who are infrequent readers. Average home might have about 100 books, you know, inside of children's books or, you know, in the house, access choice, but frequent readers tend to have a number like 140 or something like that inside the house. So building the reading environment can be as simple as numbers, right. but it's a little bit deeper than that. It's not just about having, you know, everything everywhere. What we're going to talk about here is also about like the social part of that. What is the reading environment beyond just having 100 books on the shelf? So Andre, you want to start off with that? And then...
I can too as well. I think our children are very resilient too as well. You can only imagine that the last 3 years in the pandemic, again, I mentioned that we were a home visiting program where we had to literally change our whole model and actually go hybrid. So now you have a home visitor that's looking at a phone or a tablet, and everyone had to be retrained. We're flying the airplane, we're building an airplane while we're flying it and going forth with our model. And do you not know how hard it is to engage a child on a tablet for 30 minutes and trying to get that done? So we really relied on the parents and really building the parents because we were not in the home, so we could not assess. And I forgot to mention too that every time we go in the home, we do an assessment of the child and also the parent for their development. And so that's part of the way that we collect our data too as well. And we score the child, the parent begins to score themselves. They learn different parenting skills that they're used to as well. So we really, over the last 2.5 years now, had to really depend on the parents in their engagement with the child. And to get back to this diversified books, we know that when children see themselves in books, it builds up their self-esteem, it builds up their self-identity, it builds up their self-worth because they begin to see their culture, their identity by authors who are authentic to their culture and to their language overall as well. So.
Absolutely. I mean, when we were talking a little earlier, you mentioned format. And so she was giving me like a soft pitch because I love comics. And one of the things for me with reading environment is format. And it's not having only, you know, text there, but also in, you know, different age ranges and stuff like that. But particularly, you know, when we look at the continuum, you know, coming out of our last thing in the K-12, the Kids and Family Reading Report shows that there's what we're calling a decline at 9. So the kids who reading, they love to do it. Age 9, between 8 and 9 is where you kind of see that drop off. It matches up with the 3rd grade numbers and stuff like that. And for me, who loves comics, there's another part of the report where they talk about the kids that are at age 8 and 9, specifically when they ask them, what is the favorite type of book that you like to read? It's not chapter books, you know, it's not biographies, it's graphic novels. You know, they're identifying a format. And so for me as a teacher with the reading environment, it was important to me I plastered one wall in my classroom with comic book posters. You know, I didn't explain why, I just did it. You know, this entire wall, you know, there'll be reading charts over here and vocabulary words over here and the calendar over there. And yeah, the wall behind my desk just happens to be plastered with comic book posters, manga posters, and all of that. And so that the kids who read comics, as a high school English teacher, I'm signaling that those are here, you know, they count here, it's valid literature, I'm down to talk about it. You can throw me off topic very easily, you know, by asking me if I think that Superman or the Incredible Hulk would win in a fight, you know, like, okay, we're not gonna learn today because we're gonna have that conversation, you know, but I thought that, you know, it was important. And if a kid who wasn't into comics saw them like, Miss, you're really into comics, huh? I'm like, yes, I love them. You know, but meanwhile, I'm teaching academic English. So what else, you know, with the reading environment? Go ahead, Jill. Yeah.
Yeah, so was going to go back to the physical environment a bit and then want to talk about format real quick to pitch it over to Tammy. So the physical environment is so important. One of the key programs that Heart of America has focused on in our 25 years is library makeovers. And what we've found, if there is one space in a school that you can touch and have the budget to renovate, it's the library, because it touches every student. And you know, I can't imagine the schools that are converting the library spaces into something else. And I think that is something we need to be loud about. It's unacceptable, and it is impacting our kids. And actually our workforce, and I'll get to that maybe in a little bit, but the physical environment where you find and have access to books and you find that great format is important. It is important for libraries not to be the quiet space anymore, but rather discovery centers. And to be welcoming to the parents. In a lot of our library makeovers, most of them have been inner city, we do a parent nook too. And that really that made me think, as I'm listening to you, Andre, you know, reading is a two-generation approach. Often the families that struggle the most with reading, and particularly in economically challenged area, it's not only that they can't buy books, but they might not know how to read themselves. And so how do you create an environment, and a school is a perfect place to do that, or a public library or community center, where it is welcoming to all generations, the caring adult, the grandparent, the parent, and the student and the teachers. It's a place of comfort, it's safe, and it should be a place of stimulation and discovery. With that, I did want to just go back and talk about format a bit, particularly with oral language. So we do a ton of work in Native American communities and Navajo Nation particularly, which is actually one of the largest tribal communities in our country. They first started writing down their language in 1995. So think about how important now Navajo language books are to their cultural preservation. Indigenous languages are some of the languages that are being lost at the most rapid pace, because generations going on and on have less and less interest to actually learn their native language. So when we produce books in languages that are scarce, we preserve culture and give them another format to continue learning about themselves and about their important history and culture. So again, the oral language connection to the written word is very, very important. So on to you.
I love that. I love this format and diversity of languages. This environment is going to be very rich. Yeah.
It's where it's at, and again, we need to hold hands and support our children across generations and all different ways. And their parents.
Wholeheartedly agree with what everybody has said, and I don't have that much more to add on the oral language part and environment. You know, it takes, some kids are going to need 3 hours of instruction a day, and another kid is going to need 5. And it's really hard as a teacher to know how to support the joy of reading in a classroom with some kids who aren't quite reading the same as the other kids in the class. But
let me just add too, and this is really my pitch to publishers like Scholastic and to others, to translate even a book from English to another language. Those books in the different languages are much higher than the ones in English. And we're working with folks who cannot afford those level of books as well. And so, you know, we need to really come together with the publishers to say, how can we reduce the cost to really get these books into the hands of different families. My program, we try to translate the books that we have in 55 plus different languages nationally. And again, we're in 6 international countries as well, so as much as possible. But the costs can be astronomical in doing that. And so, we really would ask publishers and those that are presenting these books to be able to somehow try to reduce these, and I may be getting in trouble with this, but to reduce the price of these books for folks who
You're not going to get in trouble for asking at all.
Who speak English. And I think that's really, really fundamental, as we know that, New York is facing, for example, the migrant immigrant population is here too as well. And programs like mine is being asked, how can we get involved with the migrant immigrant population who are coming from various countries and so forth. And they're in hotels. And now we've got to get program partners who want to do home visiting in the hotels. So when we talk about space, sometimes those spaces can be a little bit awkward. We've worked with homeless families where we've met people in the libraries in a particular room or a particular area of the library to sit down with their parent too as well. Because parents, although they're going through all of these other social issues, still want to see their children succeed. And it's really, really critical at this point. It's one of my passions too as well. And you can probably tell I come from a faith background. I always believe of whom much is given, much is required. How do we get to those parents who really need us the most? My program primarily works with low-income families who do not have the economic means as you and I may have to in this room. So we want to continue to work with those parents because we do believe and we know that our program works. We have kids who have gone through our program who graduated college. We even had a former, well, currently is still a lawyer, who's a former board member, who was a participant in the ParentChild program. That's on our board too as well, so that goes across the country to really talk about his experience as well. Those are the kinds of things that we need.
Yeah, and can I just piggyback, Andre, thank you for bringing up the cost of diverse books in different languages, because it is a reality and a real consideration when you're choosing to buy a book that might be in your language versus clothing or food. And so that is exactly why Diverse Books Coalition came together and was formed. As I said earlier, we have taken the 40 nonprofits and associations in our distribution levels and have figured out we have about 20% of the market share. So we've invited publishers and would love Scholastic to come along, because I know you have some great books in a magnitude of languages, probably more than most, to produce books like the ones I have here, and if anyone wants to see them, to produce books, ooh, thank you, Tammy, that, again, are in different languages. So we just did our first RFP, and we had almost over 24, actually 40 publishers come to the table with some offerings, and we landed on less than about a half dozen. And we will be distributing these books under the Diverse Books moniker within the next few months. So again, the cost of diverse literature is quite high because it's such a short run and such unique literature. So, and I'm sure that you can attest to that.
Yeah, 100%. And, certainly have colleagues in the building working on that. And I will let you know where I send all of the books that are in all the languages if you're in New York. So that's how I can help. This is what my little way that I help. So we get books from foreign publishers when we give them rights to translate a Scholastic title. They have to mail us back copies of the books so that we can look over them. They mail us more than we need. And so I donate them to the Queensborough Public Library, the extra. And that is because I'm from Queens, but also, that's my library, but also because the Queensborough Public Library circulates more books than any other library in the world. Doesn't have more books, it circulates more books. And the Queens Public Library has more languages, more books and languages than any other library in the world, just the volume of languages that circulate within there. And Queens, as everybody talks about, all the languages that are spoken in Queens. And so I also, I know some people who work there because I'm in the library world. So, as I'm seeing, I've got Dogman in Hebrew, and Dogman in Russian, and Dogman in Ukrainian, and Dogman in Spanish, and Dogman in all these different languages, and so, I send them, because I can't do much with like just 2 or 3 copies, but the thing about libraries, my pitch for libraries is that one book can circulate something like 50 or 60 times before it falls apart. And so, I'm trying to just make it, stretch as much as possible. And they have assured me that they are trying to get those books into the neighborhoods where those languages are, spoken specifically, so that they go to those branches, but they can travel around too. So, more to come. Pressure us, pressure the other publishers. That's the way that you get the things you want. Yeah.
Change happens.
Exactly.
She actually shared that, how many languages do you have in the Scholastic library approximately?
I would have to double check and count, but it's all of the publishers that we do foreign language deals with. So I would say like the Dogman book is probably published in the most languages, or Captain Underpants, Dave Pilkey's materials are internationally known.
Yeah.
And if I just, thought off the top of my head, there's at least 20 different languages for the Dogman book. So every time there's a new book, then we get 20 copies of it, because it's, all the different languages.
That's great.
Yeah. And
appreciate what you're doing for the sector too, in the industry. So we will make sure you get the RFP next time.
Thank you. 557 Broadway, New York, 10012. All right, so we have been talking a lot about the respect for culture as we've been having this conversation, which I love, because it is part of every aspect of, making literacy relapse. No, that's not the way, But I wanted to make sure that we did give some time if there's anything that anybody wanted to add in, to some of the comments. We've talked about windows, mirrors, and doors, which is Rudine Sims Bishop's, theory that kids should have books where they see themselves. You should also have windows where you can see into another world. You should also have sliding glass doors where you can go all the way into that world and you feel like you're part of it. But beyond just the numbers, there's a paper I'm going to plug here by Krista Aronson and Ann Sibley O'Brien. The title of the paper is Messages Matter. I love this research that they did, because they weren't just looking at diversity as far as numbers, not just that we need more, but also what types of books. And so they only look at picture books, and they are only looking really at race and ethnicity. They came up with 9 different categories that describe the types of books, the types of, topics and things that are covered in children's picture books. And so they have like a day in the life, concept books, biographies, so there are 9 total. And when they break it down by the racial groups, you can see what type of stories different communities tend to get. And so the example I usually share is that for African-American kids, they tend to get, like the bar is the biggest for stories of oppression and biographies. Whereas for, say, Native American kids or maybe Asian kids, their numbers were kind of similar when you look at this. They mostly get stories about like concept books, a day in the life, folklore, fantasy, and stuff like that. So, within that, how do we kind of get to the myth, the model minority? We haven't heard the stories about how they have, pushed and struggled and helped to build the United States. Because we're not getting the biographies and we're not getting the stories of oppression. So, that being said, I do think it's important that we have those stories. It's everything that's going on in the world right now. Sometimes the parent has to teach those lessons at home because they're not, teachers aren't able to give the lessons at school. But, it's not just about diversity as far as race and gender and, sexual orientation and religion and economic diversity, but also the topics that and the way that we see these different communities portrayed inside the books and stuff like that. So that's what I wanted to add about respect for culture, is just that, like African-American kids want to have fantasy and folk tales too, and we need, more biographies that tell us about the, impact that, for example, Asian American community has had on the development of the United States. So if anybody else want to add?
I would just add too, I think it's an issue of also equity, because we know that certain school districts get more resources than other school districts do as well. My daughter, for example, goes to Rye High School. where there's a ton of resources in the public high school, and then high school looks like my boarding school almost. But there are many folks that don't have the same access to the similar types of resources, same quality of teachers, same quality of libraries too as well. And so it's also an issue of also being equitable across our city and our state as well. Because there's certain parts of the state that are doing a lot worse, like Buffalo and Syracuse and Rochester too as well. Let me also give a plug into many of you may be familiar with the Education Trust of New York. They have a handout out called A Call to Action. It's the state of early literacy in New York, where they talk about these particular statistics. And I'm a part of one of their umbrella organizations, which is called Raising New York too as well, where we talk about home visiting and also making things equitable. But they really focus in on the science of literacy and what that really means, what it means to the other social issues, including unemployment, poverty, the prison population, and that impact starts early on. So I just wanted to add the whole issue of equitable resources across the board, because as many of you know, we have school districts too that get certain resources, but other communities like in central Brooklyn do not.
Anyone have any questions for our panel? Go ahead, Janet.
Yes. Hello. You have your superhero comics on the back wall. There are two series of books that have galvanized readers, reluctant readers in the United States, English-speaking reluctant readers. One is Wimpy Kid, and one was Harry Potter. Now, do those, I mean, one's a story about a kid that's sort of agnostic, Wimpy Kid, and one is a magician, which is sort of also agnostic. Do those characters in those stories speak to children from across diverse populations, or because they came out of English-speaking worlds, are they really more appealing to English-speaking readers? I've never really thought about Wimpy Kids in Egyptian or Spanish.
I don't know if one of you guys want to answer that. I mean, I would say yes. You know, certainly I find ways to connect to books that go beyond just, you know, my having a similar race or gender, those different kind of things. It really often does come down to the quality of the writing, you know, page turning and stuff like that. That being said, you know, when you do see yourself in a book, it can be a different experience than just... For me, sometimes it's a little surprising because I'm not used to it, you know, to see myself in a book and to see a character that's living an experience similar to mine, because I don't often experience that when I'm reading. But to answer your question, yes, I think that those books, they spoke to all kids, all ages, and it's because of the journey of the individual, you know, the reluctant hero, you know, part of the stories, and with Wimpy Kid, the jokes, and kids like books that are funny, you know, in particular. So those series rise up and become universally loved. But what we would hope is that there are opportunities for more diverse people to tell their stories, because there are wonderful, engaging, page-turning stories out there that, you know, all kids would enjoy, but also would allow, you know, kids that are not brown and black to get a window, you know, into and get lost in a world just like we did in Harry Potter. So, yeah.
And I would just add that often I believe it boils down to translations too, translating the book in different languages. And if they're reading that book in their native language, then they start to see themselves even more as that character. And it's not until the movies come out that they're like, oh, Harry Potter's from England. And, you know, I mean, there were
no
some
English
clues.
accent in the book. Yeah.
But you think about even Little Mermaid and the remaking of Little Mermaid right now. So one of the most effective formats of storytelling that we've seen for the Navajo Nation is when Disney actually translated Finding Nemo. And, you know,
Yeah, I think they did Star Wars.
they
too.
did
Like
Star Wars too, and they
Navajo was
should
a
do
big deal.
Harry
Yeah.
Potter as well. So I think those, you're right, those iconic stories can lend themselves to everyone. And then it's how they're interpreted that can guide others in thinking. Yep.
So I have 100 questions, but I'm going to try to focus. I'm going to try to focus here. I'm going to tell you what I heard, and then you fill in the blanks. And I think you have multiple goals here, which is what is confusing me. You want kids to read maybe in their, what I'm going to call native language, but I guess the hope is they'll learn English at the same time or in parallel to that. And in some of those households, you have parents who either can't read in English, maybe they can't read in their original language, you know, their native language or whatever. So how many of these families and how many of these households, and I have a whole other question about how they're selected, but how many of these families have access to digital, you know, a computer, or, I mean, could you give them a book in English and have them, you know, have a code where here it is in Russian, here it is in Ukraine, here it is in Hebrew, you know? Is there a way that you can reduce the cost and increase the access across those various languages to get them to read in their, again, native, quote unquote, native language, regardless of the content, but still, you know, I think the goal is to have them learn English as well. I mean, they're in the public school system for the most part, right? The people that you're dealing with. So to me, the whole concept seems insurmountable. I mean, I commend you all. It's a devastating task in my mind, but. Well, that's where I'm going. I feel like there's tools available, and believe me, I'm in the print industry, so the more printed books you make, the happier I am. I'm trying to put that aside, be holistic here, but
I don't know the science of it to defend it per se, but there are, as somebody was mentioning, a few models with keeping kids in a different language through, for whatever reason, these earliest years. You know, and we were talking earlier, we all have some common history with New Mexico, and in the Pueblo of Jemez, the education department with the schools on the Pueblo is trying to keep the kids in Jemez through 2nd or 3rd grade, and that's part of their language revitalization program. But, you know, part of it is when they're teaching them the way that the language relates to each other and things like parts of speech and how you talk about the past and, you know, and all of that, and that translates over to when you're talking about a different language, because they're, you know, it's structures and comprehension and all that kind of stuff is the same. The symbols may change, you know, and so it. Yeah, and also I was gonna. Well, yeah, yes, yeah. Well,
I think ideally it would
just-
be that you keep the native and cultural language,
Do
and
both.
also do both.
Yep.
Right.
And I believe there are studies that says that you can start out in your native language because once you get in school, it's easier to actually pick up the English once you get into school. And for us, it's also parent choice. Would you like it in your language or would you like it also in English? I think Jill just showed the book where you have the English and the other language on both sides of the page sharing out the same story. So it's really giving the parent the ability to choose to as well, since it, again, for us, it's really the parents are the first and primary teachers inside the home. So we want the parents to also be able to choose. It's very important. Sure. With us, particularly during the pandemic, a lot of people didn't have tablets. Tablets were very expensive. We were able to get, through some foundations, folks to actually buy tablets. Now, very simplistic, it wasn't the device, it was the Wi-Fi service. It was the cell service.
oh yeah.
So that was there. Most parents had a cell phone. So we were able to actually do the video and the processing on the cell phone, and those that did not have it, we were able to contact foundations and try to get funding to actually supply certain tablets. I mean, obviously it wasn't the most expensive ones, but I believe Apple at the time was giving out tablets. That's what they did in the school system too as well. They were being able to get tablets into the hands of families during that particular period, and the tablet became the gift for the parent that we were serving to as well. So we're able to get that for certain groups across the country. Certainly everybody wasn't able to do that, but most parents still had a cell phone, and we were able to do it on the devices too as well. Mm-hmm. Sure. But that's true, but the tablet for us was not just to have like a Kindle where you had the book on the tablet. We were actually, and this is great for my partners, they were actually dropping off books during pandemic. So although they could not go there, they would actually knock on the door, leave the hard book, and then watch the parent and the child engage through the tablet, the hard book. So I want to applaud, obviously, my program partners that were able to continue to do that. So they were going into the New York public housing. They were going to certain neighborhoods, and because they had, again, building that relationship, were able to still give the book to the child, as well as educational toys to the children. And then the hardest part was really seeing the child on the tablet for many of our early learning specialists, because they had built such a great relationship with the parent, and then really relying on the parent on their ability to, even if they could not read, use the dialogic reading model to see the child turn the pages and say, that's a red dog, or, that's an orange, and so forth.
Yeah. The red dog.
No, Mel, can I ask him a question? I could see it coming. But this also proves that this conversation needs to keep going. And I feel like our organization will make sure that happens. So I will be writing and calling you, so can we schedule something for February? So just in case, I'm just telling you ahead of time. But I want to say, hey, thank you. This was an enlightening conversation. My mind was blown all through it. So as Moan said, we should pressure the publishers. So, call, write, SOS. We'll see what we can do to help out. I also want to thank the audience for being as enraptured by this conversation as I was. And I want to thank you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the Scholastic people who are not going to yell at us for staying too late. We apologize. And we hope to see you again in our next meeting. All right, bye-bye. And we have to stop book banning. But I feel like that's a whole other discussion that will just keep going for the next 3 hours. So we don't want to do that. So thank you, and good night.